Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Course. Today, we want to talk about what it means to be authentic, to be in touch with your authentic self, to live an authentic life, and how to tap into that, how to discover your authentic self, what that means exactly. Because we've talked quite a bit about healing and what that means, and part of healing is getting back in touch with your authentic nature. Because if you are not truly connected to yourself, who you are at your core, and that's what we're talking about when we say authentic. So if you're not truly connected to yourself, you're not fully engaged with life. I mean, you're not experiencing the depth of connection in your relationships. You're not tapped into your full potential, the things that light you up. You're not in your full expression, and the other people in your life are not getting to experience who you really are.
Mhm.
You're operating instead from a mask or multiple masks, these false ways of being, these ways of being that you learned you had you had to be based on whatever you experienced as a child, the ongoing messages we get from society and social media and family members and everything around us in our environment telling us what is acceptable to be,
Mm.
who we need to be. So we're missing out on so much when we're operating from that false place rather than an authentic, really tuned in, connected place.
Right. Our culture at this time seems to be really putting so much emphasis on the persona or this kind of outer shell of who we are. And of course, there's so many different people supporting this work of discovering our authentic self. But I think through social media, through just we see what we see on magazines, just so much messaging of what we get doesn't necessarily nurture who we are within. And I had this message come to me a number of years ago, and it went something like, if you want to be truly loved, you need to be truly seen for who you are. And I think that's something that gets missed out on so often is this experience of being loved for who one truly is. And so, yes, the being loved part, but also, as you mentioned, getting to feel what it feels like to be who you are on this earth right now. And I know for myself, it took quite a bit of time and searching and self discovery to distill and to learn who I truly am. And there was a lot of weeding out of who I thought I was, who I thought I was meant to be, and these ideal images of who I thought I should be in a lot of ways. And through the discovery of kind of weeding out all of these shoulds and would'ves and all of these things, I got to really distill these inner values and feel this like almost locking in of connection of who I am. And I get to relate in ways that feel really natural. I get to feel comfortable in my body in a lot of ways and use my inner compass as a guide for new experiences or how I want to navigate choices and relationships in life.
Yeah. So if you think about it, we're all born perfectly whole, free, totally free, uninhibited, free to just be who we are, to, connect, to feel, to express. And we allow ourselves to just be held and to connect and be seen. And then as we move through childhood development and just our growth, and we start engaging with the world and with people, we get these messages, sometimes clear, direct messages, sometimes really subtle, covert messages about who we are, how the world or other people view us.
Mhm.
And we get that feedback constantly, however, when we're babies and we're crying, however our caretaker responds to us in that moment is information that we hold on to about expressing our emotions. Is it okay for me to cry? When I cry, how does my caregiver respond? Do I receive comfort or do I receive punishment or negativity or pain? And that just continues in all of our experiences as we grow. So we get messages primarily, I would say, in the beginning from our relationships, those
Mhm.
primary relationships that are so important for our survival as humans, telling us what is okay to be and how we need to be in order to receive love and care and protection, which we so desperately need.
Mhm.
And that we carry with us for the rest of our lives. I mean, that informs the way that we develop and grow. So it's really interesting to think about who we were, our earliest memories, if we had that opportunity to feel fully just free to be ourselves, what we enjoyed, what we engaged in, how we expressed ourselves, that really authentic, innocent energy before we started to experience pain and shame and disconnection that we then tried to avoid by inhibiting ourselves.
Yeah, just to kind of go back to what you were exploring there, the word attunement came to me as well. Because, of course, we, as you said, get that messaging of what's okay and not okay. And attunement brings in this other piece. Like, is our caregiver or the people around us attuned to maybe our natural being? Are they picking up on that? Are they picking up on the unique being of who the child is or who we are? And is that part being nurtured and supported as well? And I think that mirroring in so many subtle ways helps to preserve and strengthen that authentic self. And so, this question, what does it mean to live as your authentic self? Was that your question?
Mhm.
You said the word freedom earlier, and I really resonate with that. It's this freedom to live and exist and connect in a way that feels natural, at ease, true to self. And a big part of that for me is has been identifying what my core values are. And there can definitely be a naturalness, but I think that there's also been this refining process of understanding like who I am authentically. Who is Allie? Like who am I? Who is this unique soul that came into form at this time? And so I think that when we live authentically, we are living from a place that's true to our deepest values. and connecting in those ways. Our work is a mirror of that as well. Work, relationships, friendships, hobbies, just how we spend our time, how we spend our money. It's all connected to these core values of who we are. And there's a sense of like ease and naturalness that can come with that. And freedom, liberation feel like all qualities of that.
Yeah, it can be challenging to differentiate between who you are versus who you should be, quote unquote, who you learned you needed to be.
I think that, as you said, this kind of who we are versus should, there's so much goodness out there and so many amazing people and values and people doing great things that we can certainly get lost in the should. Oh, maybe I should be doing this specific kind of service work. Maybe I should be doing this job because they're really valuable, great things to be doing in this world, versus that kind of living from within to without and getting to share from that way. And I think that is a major distinction of like this idea of who we should be or who we thought we were, like a thought versus like an isness.
Hmm. Right. When we talk about the conditioned self, so, going back to thinking about childhood and how we were getting all of this feedback, verbal, nonverbal, about how we needed to be or what was acceptable to others. That's the conditioned self. And a lot of the time, people don't recognize their conditioned self. They don't recognize that the way they're showing up in the world, in their relationships, in the work they're doing, they don't recognize that it's conditioned. It just feels like this is who I am. This is who I've always been. This is how I was born. And that just speaks to the power of the unconscious mind. That as all of this programming and conditioning is happening to us as we're growing, that the mind grabs a hold of these stories from our experiences and it's like embedded way deep into the mind. And it becomes automatic that this is just how we move through the world. Kind of like most of us don't stop and think about how to eat food or how to walk, right? We just get up and we go and we move and we eat and we do these things without thinking about it. It's the same way. It's the same process with our conditioned ways of being, our conditioned behaviors. So that can be a tricky thing to even just recognize, okay, what is my conditioned self and what is my true authentic self?
Absolutely. I think that's such a great distinction of like how we just move through every day and we can get confused of that being who we are versus this opportunity to pause. And it's almost like getting this bird's eye view. We almost have to step outside to get a bigger vision of ourselves in our life, to be able to question, is this who I am? Is this truly aligned with my core values? What are my core values? There has to be this opportunity to kind of look at who we are and look at our life. And there has to be like a pause and a curiosity when we look at our life. And perhaps it is. Perhaps there are many things that are in that habitual way of living that are authentic, but maybe they're not. And this wondering about living authentically gives the opportunity to almost solidify that connection to self in that core. And I know I mentioned earlier of what is authenticity, like what does it mean to live in the qualities, and I mentioned freedom and liberation, but it's not always like that, especially at first. And when maybe we see that our life is not been the life, the habitual life, the conditioned self life that we've been living is not who we are at our core, or is not our authentic self. And that shift can be a really scary one. It can feel really vulnerable. It can feel really disorienting. It can feel really scary. It can feel really risky too, to certain relationships or ways of being. And I think that's a really big piece there of the fear and the shift.
Absolutely. Yeah. For one, thinking about recognizing that the way you've been living your life or, the career path you're on is not aligned with who you are authentically. Well, then that can be really scary when you think about, okay, what does this mean? What do I do with that? Now I have to blow up my life. It feels, like you said, can feel really risky. And then the other piece of this I think about is when we go back to childhood and that feedback process we have with the people who raised us or the primary people around us or even in our society, when we are getting that feedback about parts of us being unacceptable or unlovable, or we are getting messages about, it being really important to be a certain way that maybe isn't who we are authentically. The importance of taking in that feedback and changing the way we show up is so primitive. This need to feel accepted, this need to belong. I mean, for one, absolutely a need to be accepted by our caregivers and get their love and adoration so that we can survive. But two, we will always choose, especially as children when we're the most vulnerable, we will always choose connection and attachment over authenticity. So I will be whoever I need to be in order to receive that love and attention and security from the people around me, which very often means splitting off from parts of ourselves, hiding, denying, suppressing really important parts of ourselves or things that we truly do value naturally. And so it's a survival strategy, and it to our body, to our nervous system, it feels really terrifying to go against that messaging that really gets so deeply embedded into our psyche, to then go into adulthood and say, okay, well, I learned it was not safe to express myself or be vocal about things that I'm passionate about. So then to do that in adulthood feels terrifying, feels very vulnerable, feels very risky because it might result in, well, major discomfort, but also rejection.
Right. Such a key word there of survival, because it hits on those deepest of places and those deepest of needs, the needs for connection and belonging. And that certainly is true throughout our life, and especially as an infant and as a child. And so these ways of being get really ingrained of like, oh, this is how I'm loved. This is how I'm accepted. This is how I can belong. This is how I'm safe and this is how I can survive in the world, all the way from being a little one to being an adult. And this conditioned self, it can be so easy to miss because in some ways it does feel normal. It does feel normal, but is it true? And what is the, like, what's on the other side? What is the gift of being able to maybe stretch outside that fear as an adult? Is, oh wow, I will get to connect from a place of who I truly am, maybe, and be loved. And so it's like the reward is big, but the risk is also huge and feels huge. I mean, maybe as an adult, it's not as big, or maybe it is. Maybe it's your your whole life was built around this conditioned self, which for many it is. But it can certainly press on those early fears, and not just fears, I mean, real life survival strategies. And so, in that reflection process, it is that understanding of that part, of that very real part that needs belonging, that needs connection. And is there a willingness to risk a feeling of true belonging or belonging to oneself? I know Brene Brown talks about this, of like true belonging is belonging to oneself. And I think of, as a child, there's like the fear of betraying our caregivers. And as an adult, that fear is still there, but it's also this, then it becomes self-betrayal. And then it's this consistent self-betrayal by not learning who we are and getting to live who we are. And there is certainly a spectrum of risk. Like for some, the risk might not seem or be as high to live in their authentic self versus somebody else who perhaps they will lose a lot through staying connected to themselves or
Yeah.
learning to connect to themselves.
And so part of that process can be just reminding ourselves as adults that, the stakes aren't as high, even though there's risk here. Well, I probably can survive this risk. Whereas when we're kids, we very much can't survive. That's the felt sense. That's what our experience is when we're kids. We're so helpless and dependent on others that the fear is, well, no, I really actually won't survive if I lose this connection or attachment, if I'm not lovable to the people who are responsible for keeping me alive and taking care of me. In adulthood, of course, hopefully we're not that dependent or helpless. And so, yes, there is risk that if I do something different here and I show up differently and more authentically, I might experience some pushback. I might experience some rejection. Some people might not like or approve of this part of me or this aspect of me. And while that feels scary, you know, how can I navigate that? Maybe that's okay. Maybe there's this natural shedding of people in my life who have kept me in my conditioned state, who don't really actually accept who I am at my core. I think there's also a natural pushback that we will get from people if we have been stuck or living in a certain role or way of being, and the people we're in relationship with are used to us being a certain way, then of course, naturally, if we start to shift that and all of a sudden, if I've always been a people pleaser and putting everybody's needs before my own, and everybody around me's gotten used to that, and so that feels comfortable for them, If I suddenly start putting my own needs first and start saying no, then the other people are going to be like, whoa, what the heck is happening? What's going on? I don't like this. This doesn't feel comfortable. This is not you. This is, not the person that I've been in relationship with. And so there is this natural pushback in the transition period while not just you're getting comfortable or accustomed to this new way of being, but so are the people around you that you're in relationship with. And some people will be able to navigate that with you and, go through that discomfort and adjust to your new way of being. And some people won't. Some people won't want to connect with the authentic you or won't know how to do that.
Right, exactly. Won't know how to do that. And for them, it could also just feel like a loss. It's in the moment, it could feel like a loss, like what's happening. The relationship as I knew is changing. This person is changing. Like that can feel scary, of course, too. And of course, with people pleasing or not setting boundaries, there's different ways that people can react of like once the boundaries are in place. It's like, wait, I need to give some pushback. I still want to get the same things that I was getting before. And then certainly there can just be a little reorganizing in certain relationships that need to happen as well. And I think that those who are living more in connection with their values or they're feeling more in connection to their authentic self can hold a greater space for the transition of those around them or the expansion or change of those around them. And I think of it as this like self-connection muscle, like this building this muscle of almost like this, like having a backbone, having like having a core column of self. And it's something that gets developed. It's something that gets strengthened. Of course, it can. There are children that grow up who have wonderful parents that can help build this through childhood. And it's something that we can also build as adults. And when it comes to that fear of losing connection with someone else to be true to one's authentic self, I think the stronger that connection is, the less scary it feels to, like, the outer happenings are less of a risk to lose than losing the connection to oneself. Like that becomes the bigger risk.
Mm. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the signs that people might look for or notice in themselves that could signal that they're out of alignment or that they're not in touch with their authentic self. So we mentioned people pleasing. So if you're someone who often puts others' needs and wants before your own, if you deny, suppress your own emotions, your own thoughts and feelings and needs, if you're always afraid of upsetting someone, stepping on toes, you feel uncomfortable in social situations, or there's this fear of being judged.
Yeah, fear of judgment or judging others.
Mm.
I think both of those can be signs of not living as one's authentic self. Jealousy, envy, like chronic jealousy or envy or criticism of others can certainly point to this disconnection from self and can point to more information for someone to learn about themselves. Over explaining ourselves, certainly just needing to kind of make other people feel better about who we are. Trying, that's definitely ties into people pleasing, but reassuring others about who we are. I also think of, we talked previously about like pedestalizing, thinking other people are better than you, or other people can have something that you can't have, or this person's so great. It's like the focus, I guess, in all of this, there's so much focus on the other, in making the other person better or worse or comfortable or uncomfortable. Like there's focus on the other versus understanding the inner.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So like this concern about how I show up in this space or with these people or at work, how I'm portraying myself. And we're not just talking about, being thoughtful or considerate. We're talking about kind of this anxiety or pattern of worrying or feeling uncomfortable in certain situations, not knowing how to be or worrying about how others are perceiving you or how you might make other people feel if make a wrong step or say the wrong thing or express yourself in a certain way. I love what you mentioned about the way we project onto others. So when we notice an internal response to something that somebody else is doing or their way of being, when we notice it activates something in us, either we, in their presence, feel maybe intimidated or um, we put them up on this pedestal. Maybe we think they're, this amazing person and we want their approval and do they like us? And there's kind of this envy piece, this feeling like they have something that we want or we want to get close to. And then, oh, and the judgment piece. So sometimes certain people or or behaviors can trigger, yeah, intense criticism or judgment within us, where we think, what's wrong with them? Or I can't believe they would fill in the blank, or they're so full of themselves, or, these they activate these judgments in us. And that is all of these things are pieces of information for us. We focus, like you said, we focus so much outwardly on the other people around us. But really, they're kind of like mirrors. Whatever they are activating in us is information for us to be really curious about. Well, what is it about this person or this personality trait or this behavior that is creating this feeling of jealousy in me or is causing me to feel angry at them or put off? And what does that say about me? Is there an aspect of this person that lives in me? Or did I have some sort of messaging throughout my life or in childhood related to this behavior? And that this person is showing me or kind of, triggering in me that I can then look at.
Mhm. Such a key piece of that emotional response. That points to so much because we can certainly notice patterns, behavior, we can discern, but when there's an emotional response or activation, as you said, that gives so much information for us. And two other qualities, or two other qualities that came to me were also trying to control others' behaviors can show that our energy is outside of ourselves. We're not in our own body. We're not occupying ourselves because we're trying to occupy others or trying to change the behavior or outcome for other people. So codependency for sure too. And the other quality, which is shame. So shame about who we are. If somebody sees me, they're not going to like me, or they, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable or confident with who I am. I feel small or unlovable. All these different kind of qualities really show this need for deeper connection to self, self love, self discovery, self acceptance. And as I'm speaking, I'm noticing what I'm sharing has so much to do with like self connection, self inquiry. But what I notice through the connection to self is that there is a way to then be in the world that is in service, it's in connection, it's in relationship, it's able to show up. We're able to show up in the world. It's not always about being self-serving, but it's about occupying who we are so that we can show up in a way that is true and real and isn't depleting for us or others.
Right. When we're showing up in our full authenticity, that is where we can experience connection with others and, love and attunement. And when we're in our wholeness and our full expression, that touches everyone and everything that radiates outward, that invites other people to meet us with their authenticity and a feeling of safety.
Mhm. The word welcome comes to me as well. Like,
Mm.
I'm welcome, you're welcome, life is welcome here. There's a quality of acceptance.
Another really important piece that I think about as a signal that you've lost touch with your true self is just generally feeling disconnected, feeling numb, a lack of purpose, just feeling kind of dull. For some people, that's depression, it can be just this low level lack of fulfillment with life or lack of meaningful relationships. When you feel like you're just going through the motions.
How would you explain or understand how someone discovers their authentic self?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I go back to what I mentioned earlier. I love this question or this reflection of who who was I? If I can go back to my earliest memories, who was I before the pain or shame or rejection that we all kind of experience at some point, before that came in to play? When I was young and innocent and and not everyone actually has the space for that, but ideally some of us get a glimpse of that. What did I enjoy? Was I a 4-year-old who loved to perform? Um, or, yeah, dancing was my thing, or I just was very outgoing. Who was that person? And I think it can be really powerful. So one, just getting a picture of that and just listing the qualities out and seeing how that feels when you think about that person. And maybe there's certain memories that really stand out when you felt really connected or really joyful. And it can be so helpful to identify any moments that come to mind that changed that were maybe painful. Or maybe maybe again, I love to dance. Maybe I was dancing or performing, and I got some kind of negative feedback or some kind of messaging that somebody didn't like that, or that I was full of myself for this quality. So, also having that list of those key moments where I started to suppress that authentic energy.
I love that opportunity to have a window into our authentic self by seeing who we were when we were younger. I know for myself, I just get this smile on my face. There's this picture of me like hanging at the horse barn as a child, like just upside down like a little monkey. And I think I had like orange soda on my face and just like naturally playing in this kind of wild environment. And I just love imagining that younger part of me and the qualities that she had and getting to reintegrate them into my life and see parts of them now. Something that I also consider with discovering who our authentic self is that there can be core parts of us that are there throughout our lives and also things that change and shift, and to be open for that. Like perhaps what feels really authentic to us when we're 20 is different than when we're 45. And so some things can remain and some things can change. And so it's this consistent process of self-reflection and attunement to self. I think of like when we hear a song that just like we feel our whole body light up. I'm like, this is my jam. This is it. Like we know what that song feels like for us. And that is like just a full body yes. Everything's on board, everything's alive, everything is just connecting. And then we can feel what it feels like to just have songs that are playing and they're fine. And then there's songs that was like, that's too much, or I can't, or that's just not what I need to hear right now. And that like quality, just that like feeling of yes, we can apply to our life in many different aspects, not just with a song that we love, but like foods that we love to eat. Like for me, just it's been a process of like, what does my body like light up around for food? Or what does my body light up around for hobbies or connection or things that I love to do or work? And so that like we know, and perhaps we can learn to identify like what are those moments of yes? What are those moments of joy? What are those moments that it just is like, even in friendships, like where am I feeling like, oh, I can just like let my hair down and be who I am? Like we have those impressions, some more than others, but that can certainly be a thread for us to find it in other parts of our lives.
Yeah, so connecting to that full body yes, or those spaces and places and those people who allow us to exhale and just feel liberated. Like it's okay to just be who I am and feel fully alive in their
Mhm.
presence or in those places. And I think about so we're tapping into this reflection, this self-reflection of what lights me up, what brings me joy, where and when and with whom do I feel most alive and connected and free. And I love the piece you brought in about that picture of your child self. And so thinking about your child self, seeing a photo of your child self. And often I think we can connect to that image of who we were with, maybe some tenderness and, gosh, she was so cool or she was so free or man, I really loved fill in the blank. And sometimes there can also be sadness and grief. We can look at that young child and feel this longing or sadness about what has been lost. Gosh, she was so free, or um, she loved to dance or perform, or she was so connected. She made everybody laugh. Where'd she go? And so that just noticing what comes up in you, these pieces of information that can guide us to where we lost ourselves or how we are embodying our authentic self today is really important. And another great question I think about is what am I afraid people will reject me for? If I allowed myself to show up totally uninhibited or totally as me, what parts of me am I afraid will be rejected or won't be accepted by others?
Mhm. Yeah, thinking of pieces that we've kept locked away and hidden, it certainly is important to develop our relationship with them and strengthen the relationship with them as we're also exposing them to to others and to the world simply because they were locked away for reasons for survival and safety and connection. And I think that as we're bringing these pieces out, to approach them with tenderness at times as well.
There's there's so many pieces to healing and wholeness. And when I think about this authenticity piece, it just feels so at the core, so central to healing. This process of releasing anything that isn't you, stepping outside of your conditioned self, healing those memories, those experiences you had that resulted in you needing to abandon parts of yourself and deny who you were so that you can get back to reclaiming the parts that are you, allowing yourself to embody who you really are and the things that light you up.
And that creates so much safety to be who we are and learn that that is okay. The nervous system can experience this sense of safety because we are allowed to exist. We are allowed to just be here.
Yeah.
And it's safety for us and it's safety for those around us. Like, I know for me that I can feel so much more comfortable around someone who I know accepts themselves and who is authentic to themselves and welcomes all the different aspects of their being. I feel like I am welcome there too. And so it's for us and it's for those around us as well. It's like this network of connection and being and acceptance and welcoming and existing.
Yeah, you can feel it. You can absolutely feel it when you're in the presence of someone who's truly in their authenticity.